I will be forward momentarily. I will be forward. High noon U.S. Central Standard Time on Blog Talk Radio and a social media platform near you.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings. Come on in. All is a blessing. All is truly and indeed a blessing. Alafia. Hello.
To Africa, to come back home to Africa, the planted cat, golden rain, I'm waiting for you once again. Coming back,
Hey, dude.
I'm longing for my family. Coming back to you. Out of bondage, and now I am free.
Aquaba.
Come back home to Africa. You're calling your name away. Come back home to Africa. The fatted calf and golden ring. I'm waiting for you once again. Coming back. I'm longing for my family. Coming back to you. Out of bondage and
Jumbo. Habargani. Bawoni.
come back home to Africa. Come back home. Come back home to Africa. Come back home. Da, 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 da,
Ki Ojo Day, Ashe, Asheo. Divine, all blessed greetings, peace and love, joy and prosperity, elevation, revelations, and manifestation. You are now listening and sitting live with Prince, Pan African spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor, Elagun Oloye Hoodoo Obeah Bokor, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan African hoodoo world spiritualist perspective. Understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing. If you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. This is my constant prayer, my mantra, affirmation, reverberation, my reiteration, and it is my ever living reality. All is a blessing is crucial to the very foundation of my inner standing, my teaching, my walk, my works, my demonstration along this divine, all blessed life path and journey. It is how I, Divine Prince, make sense out of all that we are challenged with here in our daily existence on Mother Father Earth. And it is my personal place of power and understanding, the place from where I begin, the place from where I realize and crystallize all my endeavors, understanding that I and I alone create and co create my divine law, blessed destiny. I and I alone create and co create my divine, all blessed reality. And so it is. Ashe. Greetings and salutations, one and all, this Tuesday. I'm sorry, Wednesday. I apologize. Wednesday, June 5th, 2024. And I am emanating and vibrating with you and for you now, live, virtually, verbally, cosmically, quantum universally from this working temple of the House of the Divine Prince. Thai Potions, Hoodoo Central, LLC, in the legendary, historic, beautiful, and most enchanted city in America, New Orleans, Louisiana, the land of my ancestors and those who came before me along the spiritualist hoodoo Obeah life path and journey, passing down the great Obeah stick along with the knowledge of the life-giving herbs, roots, plants, ritual spirits, and minerals. Indeed, I am always honored and grateful to be present here in this sacred, shared sacred space with you to share the legacy, culture, traditions, and history, and indeed our sacred stories. Are you all paying attention at all to Interview with the Vampire season 2? My house is in there at some point. I've been closely watching, waiting on the storm, where my house will be featured on Interview with the Vampire season 2. So I'm really looking forward to that. I am honored always for those who are sharing space here now with me live in the chat, uh, by way of YouTube, social media, by way of blogtalkradio.com/the hyphen divine prince, blogtalkradio.com/the divine prince, and youtube.com/voodoo Thai, V like Victor, OO, D like David, OO, T like Tom, YE, Voodoo Thai. And my live listening and calling number is always area code 563-999-3763. 563-999-3763. In the continuation of our discussion, our talk about voodoo and resistance, hoodoo, conjure, witchcraft, religion, certainly in revolution, in resistance, and we've even discussed it at levels and in circles that we don't often associate with magical concepts at all, to include religion, major mainstream religions, i.e., Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and even at the governmental level, um, Russia, America, certainly going back to World War One and Two, and often there's a little mix of not just psychics and remote viewing and witchcraft in there, but even some alien um, secrets and alien mysteries often are um, hidden away in these documents that are being revealed now through the Freedom of Information Act, but are also being revealed through great authors, writers, students, practitioners of the traditions, and certainly those who are enamored and respect these traditions. Um, Today, I want to talk a little bit more on the same topic, but we're going to look a little bit closer at witches and resistance, and particularly as it shows up in the cultural, political, sometimes governmental level, and always at the spiritual, ethno-cultural, spiritual, and religious level. Indeed, those who dibble and dabble, if you will. This document that I'm pulling from today was compiled by Kay Scarlett Harrington. And so the project joins other academic conversations regarding the dynamics of power, modernity, witchcraft, and magic within the context of Western hegemony, occasioned by periodic cultural events and the reinforcement of ideologies like those found in the Dobbs decision, QAnon conspiracy, and rise of Christian nationalism, wherein it's always this hidden veil of witchcraft, not just overt, sort of almost cult like demonstrations of evangelical Christianity and so called evangelical language, but documented footprint, documented receipts of witchcraft being utilized within these organizations. And this project contends that evaluating the potential power, political power residing in witchery is necessary in understanding some of the nuances of hegemonic control and resistance to oppressive authority, predominantly following radical evaluations of magic found in the works of Gunn and Cavino. I maintain a non universal methodological practice that works to understand the various instrumentally presented in the subjects of analysis in the line with William Northshire, Carol Blair, Gary Copeland. I too contend that universal abstract methodological structures and formulae for critics are ill suited for the contemporary radical criticism, especially analysis like those projects in which the topic demands attention to idiosyncrasies in order to gauge the uh, discursive bigger picture. My methodological praxis engages in what Mercuro calls the new instrumentality of critical rhetoric that demands alternative approaches, especially in relation to reclaiming the utility of a meaning centered orientation. Though this project concerns itself with witchcraft and magic, the methods and theories deployed therein work to demystify dominant power structures by illuminating how, as McCarroll states, rhetoric conceals as much as it reveals through its relationship with power, knowledge. Magic is a convoluted idea. This project seeks to attend to unpack some of the mess in addition to analyzing the discourses and rhetoric of contemporary witches doing the same. The supposed eradication of witchcraft and magic is the creation myth of modernity. It has and continues to be the foil for standards of propriety, righteousness, civility, and rationality. The witch has picked up many meanings on their journey throughout historical space and time. Some of the witches presented in the chapters of this project exist in different fictional elsewheres. Others exist in different points in linear time and different conditions of materiality. There are other practitioners, not of marginalized identity, who are not heretically and instead deploy who are not heretical and instead deploy magic to reinforce their existing power symbolic social order. Like Convino of 2000, I dubbed the latter magi as sorcerers, and they are markedly different in their witch counterparts. Unlike sorcerers, witches threaten the status quo because they transform the material with their transgression. In the chapters contained herein, I have tried to illustrate that witches all live and transgress differently. There is no singular image of the witch. There is no one generalized truth for practicing the craft. The consistent characteristics seen among those analyzed is magic as a response to symbolic social marginalization, which is a near universal idea applied to feminine bodies and characteristics, but it has been applied differently based on the conditions of slavery, colonization, neoliberalism, and variations in which um, epistemistic violence has been enacted. The witch shapeshifts, but agency remains the evergreen characteristic pinpointing their existence. This makes the archetype of the witch a point of identification for marginalized bodies, historically feminine bodies, to gather around, working as a type of discursive umbrella. The historical deployment of the witch archetype as a means to civilize and assimilate others into the standards of European white supremacist modernity have had the unintended consequence of creating a broad but nuanced symbol for others across intersections of Babylon. Witchcraft offers the exiles of society an alternative, symbolic social order that aids in their survival on the peripheries of hegemonic boundaries. Occult languages, connotations, and symbols offer a variety of vocabulary for their experiences that ordinary language has made ineffable, particularly in social media spaces, which often create and birth languages, coded languages unto itself. Witches, spells are more impolite because they are deployed from mouths already considered dangerous and clamorous. Within this framework, we can see witches' spells as a rhetoric of subalternately rhetorical, subalternately rhetorical meanings create in ways that defy traditional delineations of the real. Witches' spells are a priori impolite because they are deployed from twitching tongues already considered dangerous and clamorous. And like the ancient cynics before them, spellcasting by witches, heretical magi, is a form of parrhesia, an expression of truth telling that exposes the simulacra of absolute order conjured by the state. This, in turn, can ensure imagination, fantasy, and invention of a world considered unreal under current material conditions. Rejecting heretical placement in the symbolic social order is, in a sense, supernatural, paranormal, otherworldly. When we consider spells as rhetoric, we consider the available means of persuasion and agency for the otherwise powerless. The subaltern conjurations enact what Convino of 1994 asserts is the dynamic complexity of celestial and terrestrial intelligence that attend any word and render it calculus of possibilities. Such possibilities include altering material conditions, systematic and systemic oppressive forces. And so we can and have in a series of podcasts demonstrated usage of voodoo root work, conjure, voodoo with four O's, voodoo with the U, certainly in Haiti, the so-called New World, and even other Aboriginal indigenous regions of the world to fight oppressive systems globally. It is a universal concept at the root nature of indigenous Aboriginal spirituality and tradition, and no less Pan African spirituality and tradition to include HT. We discussed one day Ghana in a more modern context and its continued usage and ability to adapt and reevaluate and give voice to not only the traditional systems of Aboriginal spirituality and religion, but certainly the evolution of these practices and traditions, which always, since time immemorial, continue to evolve, continue to grow. One of the consonants, I would say, is perhaps the art, the gift, the craft, the science of divination. Um, Certainly the Kapele, the divining chain, the um, um, Ifa in Yoruba culture, the Fa in Fan, and all of its pronunciations, Dafa, Afa, Dibia, but often at its root is what the Bible tried to reference as casting lots, but we understand to be this complex binary coded system that not only works to allow mouths for our deities within the Pan African diaspora, and particularly Voodoo, Ifa, Santeria, Lukumi, Kandable, Palo, indeed qualified root work conjure hoodoo practitioners who understand that there's a math, there's a science behind casting shells, behind casting lots. For the untrained eye, it might appear, even in the West African diasporic YouTube video, it might be appear to be, a series of seeds, rocks, and coins and other, random objects. And certainly And I say the same thing about, authenticity in tarot. Certainly, there's a difference between I feel, I sense, and sort of mixing these signs and symbols around as a distraction or an attraction, depending on your translation of it, versus those who really understand that there is an organized system of understanding behind these symbolic structures that can be documented. There are receipts, there are footprints. And so, to the untrained eye, it looks dramatic, it looks productive, it looks busy, it looks, ritualistic, but there's certainly a math, a science that's taking place, and a great demand on memory. Often, the communities where this form of divination is taught require a great deal of time, effort, resources, commitment, but particularly on the memory, learning 16 primal signs and then, um, giving the other possibilities after 16 twice, creating 256 possible dues of understanding that I refer to as a capsule of information that must be unpacked. Um, Takes a lot of memory. In many of the traditions, there are parables and proverbs and particular plant lore and history associated with these signs and these symbols. Singular having a particular meaning, certainly in its binary coded form, it has another particular meaning. And then, particularly the lineage, heritage, which is not just, blood related, but also where are things done, uh, where a particular way of arriving at the system is produced, also creates a lineage within itself. So often the order of these dudes from Cuba to Brazil to the U.S. to Nigeria to Ghana to Togo fall in a different seniority order. And again, a qualified practitioner must memorize that and then siphon your composite questions through that mouth that is speaking, if you will, on the divination board. Another misnomer about voodoo, hoodoo, conjure, uh, even root work, Haitian voodoo, New Orleans voodoo, is this, believing, this thinking, uh, which is a relative truth that we don't have a quote unquote a book. And the book writing thing is relatively new in the history of the world. We certainly pass things down oracally, but we also encoded, symbolized meaning, uh, history, language, understanding on stone, in sculpture, and usable art. The Aboriginal populaces, particularly of Africa, didn't create art for the sake of its beauty and its aesthetics and its keenness to the eye, certainly in the way that we do in the West. This post-Latin influence, Greco-Roman influence art concept, but art was utilitarian, was utilized in some way, while at the same time encoding language, meaning, information. And so certainly our ancestors had a greater memory. I can recall even as recently as my aunts and uncles and my great aunts and uncles having a profound memory of specific dates, specific times, specific locations, well into their 80s, 90s, and in the case where they, certainly lived longer, many of them did not digress into um, Alzheimer's or senility or dementia and had profound memories. So you find that Bokor priests, Babalao, Ianifas often have profound memories in terms of memorizing this science, this art as a craft. And so that, as I've often said in this space, would be attributed to our ability to count and our ability to remember. And I often say, if we could count in Ewe, if we could count in Fan, if we could count in Yoruba, if we could count in Hausa, uh, then certainly we could now count in Portuguese, in Spanish, in English, in French. And without losing the math, we certainly don't lose connection to our ritual days, our ritual processes, our drum pattern and rhythm and language, which we understand historically spoke a language. The idea of absence of physical drumming and physical gathering certainly doesn't replace, tapping on things, knocking on wood, and you know, stumping of the feet and other forms of hidden, coded, synchronized, assimilated understanding that takes place even today. Certain body positioning, certain phraseology, certain language, and the new language is born in every community anew every day, and with every indeed generation, and with the help of the good old internet, um, some of that new coding, becomes viral. Certainly is very lifting, the very raising of a folding chair, you know, has gone from just the most mundane of actions to something that's, full of meaning and understanding, quite possibly globally and internationally because of social media. So the idea that we were somehow bleached, um, our memories were obliterated and watched and massaged and beat out of us, and we lost connection to our ability to count, has never bear logic for me, has never been rational or reasonable to me. The idea that we stop speaking makes sense. Stop talking makes sense. There are figures historically that have demonstrated that. Maya Angelou is a great example who was violated in her youth. Her family got wind of it, and the man ended up dead. And, as children will often do, she blamed herself and stopped speaking for quite some time. This great, powerful voice that we, now understand, as Queen Maya Angelou. And so we understand trauma and trauma's ability to cause silence, to cause us to go into a emotional catatonic like state, to not want to remember, to try not to recall, and to try not to talk about. Um, we have examples historically in literature and certainly demonstrated well in theater and art, um, how you know many different avenues we'll go through as humans to not talk about something, to hold on to the denial of something, particularly if there's a repercussion attached to it, like abuse, molestation, loss of life and property, inability to move around in society, and though some of those prohibitions have gone away or uh, digressed, they have unfortunately, in other mannerisms. And in the last episode, we talked about macro and micro act of resistance, from the most um, inobvious, if I can create some words, from the least obvious, you know, such as how we might wear our hair or how we dress, to the most obvious, like how we wear our hair or how we dress. And certainly we can all, put on a rainbow t-shirt or a red, black, and green t-shirt or a red, gold, and green t-shirt or a, BLM, t-shirt. And it can either, in one end of the spectrum, be just a garment. It can be a fashion statement, popularization in culture. We talked about capitalization on commercializing, appropriating things that cannot otherwise be wiped out or eliminated. Another example of that might be the whole, interest in alien history and alien footprint, in the world. On the one end, if we can't kill it or stop it or prevent humans from, retelling these stories, then we will capitalize it. We will appropriate it. We will make it into entertainment. We will make it into books, movies, and film. We will produce it in a way that's palatable to young people and children and to the masses. We'll blend it into cartoons and holidays and festivals and make it less threatening, while all the while, is government threatening? you know, is politics threatening? Is religion not threatening in various, if not every, region of the world? And we assume a degree of liberal authority, relative to, again, where you are listening to me from, where you're viewing this from in the world. So we at every moment are at the crossroads. We at every moment of our living, breathing, waking, and I might even say our unconscious sleeping cycle are at the crossroads of decision making, choices as the children of gods, as the children of gods and goddesses. Certainly the Black woman is God. Certainly the Aboriginal, Indigenous Black woman is God. I teach that not as some voodoo philosophy, some Black power limerick, but also as science, archaeology, DNA, biology, which has clearly demonstrated that humanity rose from the womb, the cradle of the great mother, Africa. And so, indeed, the Black woman is God. So, from that, within the very DNA coding of our human bodies, it's not just, the presence of stardust and matter from the heavens, which continue to fall upon us and the earth at various degrees of volume every day, but also the presence of our foremothers, our forefathers, our foreconsciousness, the great cosmos, the great universe, the great I am is indeed I am and what I am. And so we are gods and goddesses at the crossroads of every moment of every day, making choices, making decisions, creating and recreating a reality that prayerfully, hopefully, consciously mirrors our best interests, certainly mirrors that of our families, our children, prayerfully, hopefully, consciously that of our communities, and certainly that then affects the world, the globe. We indeed are one great body, one great super body. For my meditators out there, those who are learning, studying, practicing, understand there's more to meditation than just sitting quietly and clearing the mind, and developing breath, but also do exercises, assignments as it relates to consciousness, or read, lave tech, meditation, if you will. And one of those exercises is our ability to expand our consciousness beyond our flesh, beyond our physical reality, beyond just our most immediate wants, needs, desires, past and future consciousness, but you then rise up beyond the body, beyond the house, beyond the neighborhood, the community, the village, the city, the state, the nation, the country, the continent, rise above the earth and explore even what we call outer space, universe. Some of you have those explorations in your dreams. Some of you are, and some of us are consciously invoking those explorations by conscious decision, by way of organized, self conscious, self created meditation. It might even be easier for you to create your own meditation tape and sort of talk your way through your own self guided meditation if you are unable to adequately maintain that degree of focus and inner communication with yourself as you explore and utilize that as a tool for exploring the micro, you know, as in explorations of the body. There's been some great Hollywood movies about that. And then exploration of our greater universe and indeed our greater consciousness. Um, there's those of us who indeed travel. There are those of us who indeed fly. It doesn't make you crazy. It certainly is our extension of creative imagination. And we are sort of deprogrammed from accessing creative imagination. Many of us, the older we get, the further we are removed from adolescence and childhood. Save for the artists, we allow them a particular confined boundary of created space. But I believe even the most organic artist has to create and recreate sacred space for themselves within, certainly within, but then within their literal workspace, living space, consciously create space that stimulates that creative eye, that keeps the third eye. It's a thin line between the spiritual realm and the creative imagination. It's a thin line between, the creative imagination and the opening of the third eye. Just think of any great historic artisan and just imagine, where does that information come from? Where does that vibration come from? Indeed, there are discussions, there are talks about super consciousness, global consciousness, universal consciousness. And, who knows what we are and what we become and what we experience once we're freed from the limitations of physical law, and particularly not just, i.e., physical law, but earth law, and certainly whatever physical laws apply outside of Earth's atmosphere and in other unknown, uncharted spaces of our universe. It opens up for me just a, uncharted um, diversity of options. And as a believer in the dynamics of string theory, easy to Google string theory, sort of the mathematical understanding that we live and exist in at least 11 inter and intra dimensional spaces at once in order to create this reality as we understand it individually, understanding that in all of those, or at least in one of those spaces, is all of the things that you can possibly imagine. And certainly in some of those in one of those, interdimensional spaces, all the things that you could possibly fear, and create and recreate within your creative imagination. Um, we are separated by a thin veil, and often a emotional one. It is at the root of why we are triggered by certain people, places, things, certain energies, certain sounds. We're triggered by certain music, and trigger does not necessarily have to be a negative trigger. Certain things trigger us to think more positive. Certain things trigger us to feel more positive. Certain things trigger us to remember who we are, to regain our connection to ourselves. And that indeed can be self taught, that can be programmed, that can be mentored, and that can be influenced. And we can choose to do so, or we can sort of walk, through life, believing we're sort of doing our thing and absorbing in, all sorts of information, i.e., radiation, energy, in some cases, toxicity, through all the channels that we are certainly aware of, media, certainly to include news, magazines, newspapers, TV, but certainly the social media, uh, pop culture, peer groups, what your friends and family say, what the gossip column says. And but for those most disciplined, do we limit our exposure to those things? Do we erect barriers to those things? And one of the great tools that I share and I love is the power of Oriki, the power of a good mantra, the power of a good enchantment, the power of a good spoken spell, a great affirmation. And my first and probably most powerful is all is a blessing. But I can't say anything else. It's all is a blessing. I must certainly would rather create light and room for light, room for progress, room for the good, room for the blessing, room for the possibility, than to create and recreate anything as a God, as a practitioner, you know, with my mouth. And certainly before that wind and vibration, hits the air and moves through the limitations of earth law, certainly it must be heard and resound and begin in our heads. The resounding ocean, some of you know what that is. It must reverberate in our consciousness. And that makes the negative inner talk, the negative inner language, the most dangerous, the language that we use within ourselves that diminish our power, that deny our strength, that deny, and somehow lose memory of those times when we were at our best. And it's over dominant with the thoughts of the worst things possible that are happening or could happen or have already happened. And I'm sure some of you are hearing it even as I'm speaking it. That is a conscious choice to indeed remember and recreate in our consciousness those things which empower us, as opposed to those things that limit our ability to connect and reconnect with our own natural and organic magic every second, every moment of the day. That little inner fight that some of you are still having about, well, do miracles really exist? Does God really exist? Do the answers really exist? There's all kind of words and nouns and phrases and adjectives we could throw in that question. that we challenge within ourselves each and every day that greatly affect how well we arise to the occasion, how well we show up at the crossroads at any given moment, uh, but certainly when we're most challenged and when we're presented with those illusions of the issue, the block, the complication. I always say the illusion of, I don't create and recreate a reality, certainly with my mouth, with my consciousness, that I don't wish to want to live and or exist in. It's enough to entertain it in the news. It's enough to entertain it when we listen to and sometimes consult with and empathize and sympathize for, friend, family, stranger, the most recent news story. But the ability to not take that in to our body and not recreate, in a time where there's enough recreation out here in this plastic material world that we are trying to actively do something about. We must be at our greatest and certainly maintaining our connection and understanding our connection to the divine, to God, maintaining and understanding our connection to the ancestors, which is not just, again, voodoo philosophy, but it's also science, math, physics. Maybe one day we'll talk about the God particle. Maybe another day we'll spend a little bit more time talking about ancestral memory, which science now demonstrates survives in our blood. And ancestral memory, i.e., highs, lows, traumas, ancestral memory can survive generations forward and generations backwards in the DNA, in the blood. So, from any point in time with the human, certainly they're acting and responding in some way to that encoding in their DNA, that memory, that which has happened. And there are certainly those who come moving forward, their children, their children's children, 11 generations forward that feel and respond to that energy in some form or another. And so being in some degree of conscious awareness, you might even say control of what we think, how we're thinking, particularly those who are experiencing chemical imbalance, emotional imbalance, mental imbalance. You may be also experiencing generational imbalance, chromosomal at the chromosomal level, at the molecular level within the DNA memory. Um, and so it's always wholesome to explore not just technology and medicine and in some cases pharmacology, but certainly the realm of spirit and the ways in which spirit and spirit realm play a role in not just how we show up, how we manifest, but also how we heal, how we create and recreate, how we sometimes protect and defend in a way that is ultimately within our best interest. And ours certainly is personal and independent and individual and in some cases autonomous, but also includes our children, our families, our peers, those that we say we love and care for and respect. And ultimately that affects the village, that affects the whole, that affects the nation where you are, the government where you are, the society where you are. And we offer you to do more Where you're called to do more, do more, do more, show up more, demonstrate more, whether it's macro or micro, whether it's in your small way, your small space, on your personal platform, on your, particular social media tool or outlet, in your neighborhood, in your community. Certainly, those of you who have children who are in school are exposed to, while also affecting other people's children. So we macro and micro project our inner standing, often through our children, sometimes unawares, and then there's a rare occasion, a rare crossroads where we have moments where it's clearly demonstrated how much of effect we as adults, we as parents, grandparents, godparents, adopted parents, surrogate parents show up for the children of our community, for the members of our community. And so, whether you consider yourself spiritual, mystical, magical, uh, religious, traditional, evangelical, Islamic, Judaic, Hindu, Zoroastrian, uh, Buddhist, remember your power. Remember your personal power, and that's not just for yourself, but understanding how that shows up in the world, how we each and every moment of each and every day have an opportunity to affect the world and do affect the world just outside ourselves. I imagine, leaving a house, leaving a home, leaving a location, and, you walk a block and you pass a vendor on the street. Um, the vendor might present you with the best smile and the best greeting of the day, and how you respond has everything to do with who you are in that moment, certainly at the micro level, and who you are uh, in the stream of destiny at the macro level. And likewise, too, for the vendor, the homeless person, the stranger that you pass, the, you know, passenger who's also in transit, the other coworker that you pass, within the dynamics of your employment and workspace. We have opportunities, inter and intra dimensional moments in time and space every day that we affect change, often without words, more importantly with our energy, more importantly with our demonstration, more importantly how we show up. And so I continue a call to my spiritual and religious and conscious folk, my politically aware folk, my activist listeners, to do something,
90
to do
seconds.
something. Protest, activist, do something, contribute something. And where you can't, support those who can, support those who are. I'm certainly grateful for your continued support and love, and entertaining my conversation here at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time on various platforms, but most
60 seconds.
here on Blog Talk Radio, blogtalkradio.com / the hyphen divine hyphen prince. Certainly, you can also subscribe, share, and like, also by way of youtube.com / voodoo Thai, V like Victor, OOD like David, OOTYE. And my live listening and call-in number at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time every weekday is area code 563
10 seconds.
93763. Area code 563 3763.
The homeless Indians prepared this place for us
All is a
centuries
blessing.
before our arrival. A sacred spot where
All is a
corn
blessing.
festivals
All
were
is a
celebrated.
blessing.
The homeless Indians
Respect the
prepared
virtue.
this place for us centuries before our arrival. Congo Square, a sacred spot where corn festivals were celebrated. And as the colonizers came, our hosts, the homeless Indians, they pushed aside our hosts. The colonizers came and pushed aside our hosts and introduced us in chains. And by the late 1700s, we somehow, recognizing the sacredness of Les Places de Congo, we somehow, and the how of our somehow persuasive methodologies is not clear at this moment. The how is not clear. How our persuasive methodologies work is not clear at this moment, but nevertheless, even as slaves, we crafted and created a space where we could be free to be we. And thusly we countered the sacrilegiousness of the French, giving great homage to our ancestors as well as giving praise and thanks to our red-blooded brothers and sisters. This is an oral libation toast to Congo Square, to Native Americans, to our ancestors who made a circle out of a square and gave us a way to save ourselves from the transformatory ugliness of America, which refuses to recognize the spirituality of life, which refuses to recognize the spirituality of life and celebrates death with crosses, double and triple crosses, the middle passage, the first cross, Christianity, the double cross, and capitalism, the ultimate triple coup de grace cross of our captivity. But the terror of crosses notwithstanding, we sang, we beat, we be, we was and is. Hail Congo Square. Congo Square. Our African gods have not been obliterated. They have merely retreated inside the beat of us. Inside the beat of us. Our African gods have not been obliterated. They have merely retreated inside the beat of us until we are ready to release them into a world that we recreate. A world held by the beat, beating of Black Hawk drum. Heart beat, heart beat, heart beat. At this place, beat, heart beat, we beating place in new world space. Being in place in new world, preserving our ancient pace. Our dance is the God walk, our music the God talk. First thing we do, let's get together, circle ourselves into community. No beginning, no end, connected together and singing, ringing, singing in a ring. Second, let's be original, aboriginal. Be what we were before we became what we are. Be bambula dance. Be banza music. and sing song words which have no English translation. Third, let us remember. Let us remember never to forget, even when we can't remember the specifics, we must retain the essentials. Let us remember never to forget, even when we can't remember the specifics, we must retain the essentials. The bounce, the blood, flow, the feel, the spirit, grow, energy, must retain and pass on the essential us-ness that others want to dissipate without of us. Word. But no matter how much of us they prohibit, no matter how much of us they prohibit, deep inside us is us. Deep inside us is us. Remains us inside and needs only the beat to set us free. The beat to free us. It is morning, a Sunday, a field without shade, but dark with the people black of us in various shades, eclipsing the sun without elegance. We are centuries later now, and still this sacred ground calls us to remember, to be. We are centuries later now, and still this sacred ground calls us to remember, to be, beat Congo Square. Be Congo Square. Be. Be. Congo Square. Be Congo Square. Be remember.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.